So I wanted to do something a little bit different today. So what I've done is I've generated a random birth chart. So what I've done is I've generated a random date of birth, a random time of birth, and a random place in the world. And we're going to try and somewhat, let's say, make sense of this chart. So the date that I was given was the 1st of July 1969 at 8:19 a.m. in Mondovì, Italy. And I specifically made it so the person would be an adult, so anywhere between 18 to 100 years. And this just happened to be the date that it gave me, so the 1st of July 1969. And we're going to try and put some of the pieces together and see what kind of soul agenda this person might have. And it's just a little exercise for me, and hopefully it'll be interesting for someone as well. To kind of, I've done this before, kind of just for myself, just kind of pulling up random charts and just kind of seeing what kind of themes come up. So this fictional person has Leo rising, and the person is being, the Leo rising is being supported by this very nice trine from Mars and Sagittarius to the Leo ascendant. So it's adding some spark to the fiery nature of the Leo rising. So Leo rising people can come across very gregarious. Their worldview is colored by Leonian themes of confidence, self-expression, being gregarious, supporting other people through their own creativity, and wanting to be supported for their creativity, wanting to be seen for their creativity, wanting to be acknowledged, and also acknowledging others when they have done something that's, you know, unique or kind of showing off their creative self-expression in some way. And this Mars and Sagittarius is very fiery, believes in itself, believes the person might be very kind of just has a belief in their own ideas and in their own convictions. And that Mars and Sagittarius is giving a nice trine to the Leo ascendant, so it's boosting that fire confidence tendency. But what you can see is that the Sun is in Cancer in the 12th house. So that is giving much more of a spiritual, sensitive, emotional bent to the personality. So the person might be also with the Moon in the 6th house at the end of Capricorn. The person might be interested in forms of service that have to do with kind of being behind the scenes in some way and still kind of emotionally connecting with people at the same time. So Sun in Cancer would mean that part of the soul agenda is, part of the core soul need is to be nurturing, is to be in touch with their own sensitivities, very close and connected to the people that are closest to them. Can have a hermit tendency, but also, especially in the 12th house, but also is still interested in connecting with the people that are important for, you know, the person to connect with. So it's kind of like hermiting, but with the people around you that are your core friends and family, kind of. And, you know, the Moon is in Cancer and the Sun is in Cancer and the Moon is in Capricorn, and they're not really in opposition, but if you look at the signs, they're in opposite signs. So the core needs of the soul of the person in terms of the egoic needs have to do with Cancer themes, and then the emotional needs of the person are the opposite sign, which is Capricorn. So it's interesting, this dynamic of being somebody who is interested in the home, friends, family, and kind of nurturing your own sensitivities or maybe the sensitivities of other people. But then also the emotional needs have to do with structure and kind of achievement in the outer world, and being pragmatic, and being building up the blocks for yourself in the outer world. So those are the emotional needs. The person needs some kind of structure and achievement in order to feel emotionally balanced. And so there can be this kind of a push-pull dynamic of the home versus the public life and the outer life, and kind of making something of yourself in the outside world. And the sun is, again, it's in the 12th house. It's a kind of retreating, whereas the moon is in the 6th house. And so I think I can see this kind of theme of service. So the moon in Capricorn wants to, let's say, moon in Capricorn in the 6th house wants to, let's say, practically be of service, or to build something practical in the day-to-day reality. So there's that. And the ascendant, has a lot to do with our worldview, and kind of how we step up into the world. And so that Mars trine the ascendant, I would say, is quite significant in that way. But also, the ascendant has a square from Saturn. And so the worldview might be colored by, again, these needs of structure and achievement, and being pragmatic and serious. It's connected to that moon in Capricorn as well. So Saturn square the ascendant would mean that the worldview is colored by these Saturnian themes of structure and achievement, and needing to make something of yourself, or maybe being an authority in some way, either whether it's your own authority, being your own authority and believing in your own authority, or being an authority for other people in some way. And Saturn is also in the 10th house, which has to do with our public image, and might have to do with our career and things like that. So the person might have some sort of authority over people in some way. And there, with the square with Saturn and the ascendant, there might also be themes of not only the kind of structure and pragmatism, but there might also be some sort of limiting worldviews that are maybe holding the person back in some way, because there's this seriousness in the person. Even though Mars is in Sagittarius, there's a definite kind of, and Leo rising, but there is this kind of seriousness to the person, where moon is in Capricorn, Saturn's in the 10th house, Saturn is square the ascendant. So the person is learning maybe to tap into that Mars in the 5th house, this kind of lightening up yourself. Mars in Sagittarius in the 5th house is very sort of light and energetic and fun, and wants to put energy into that fun. But there's also that side of the person that's quite serious and wants to make something of themselves in the outer world, and has this kind of air of authority to them. Even with Leo rising, Leo rising can have a kind of authority to itself, because it has this kind of confidence that it's projecting. And when people meet them, they can, seem quite confident to other people. So there's that. So I'm not going to go through every single aspect and things like that. There's a lot of aspects, but I've kind of decided that I want to focus more on the aspects that are closer and that are maybe stronger, in the sense that they're not out of sign, if you know what that means. So sometimes we might have a square between two planets, but they're not in signs that are square to each other, and that's kind of a different dynamic that is a bit more difficult and nuanced to interpret. But I want to focus mostly on the aspects that are quite strong in terms of the degrees and the orbs and things like that. So we were talking about Saturnian themes and Capricorn themes, and the sun is also sextile Saturn. So sextiles are aspects where the two planets are kind of supporting each other, and they're kind of neighbors who are getting along with each other. And so I think with sun sextile Saturn, there is again the kind of possibility to be someone who is structured and who's able to make something of themselves, and who's able to have a kind of inner authority that they maybe project onto the other like the outer world, and so they can actually be good leaders, and they can kind of maybe manage or be an authority for other people. So because they have an inner authority, right, and they have an inner way of being structured, and sometimes Sun Saturn people are said to be shy as well. But I think with the sextile, it's just that there's like a balance. There's like a stability to the way that they do things sometimes, so they're able to kind of maybe cultivate plans in a way that they're able to do things step by step and in a structured way. Let's see. So the Sun is, our egoic core needs. And there is kind of a looser square there between the Sun in Cancer and Uranus in Libra. So Sun-Uranus squares are, I've talked about this on the channel before, there is a need to be free from certain limitations and structures, but it can come out in a way that's kind of erratic behavior or unexpected events, because you're not letting that energy, it's kind of not flowing in you very easily. So you might be someone who wants to be free and who wants to have free from restraints and things like that, but it can come out in a way where you're just kind of rejecting anything that's that you don't agree with, or anything that seems to stifle you in a way that's quite premature and erratic. So you might actually not know enough about a situation before you reject it, if that makes sense. So there is, this element of the person that there probably is a need to be different and unique and free in some way, but just to kind of, there's a need to kind of, let's say, integrate the Uranian tendencies to the core self in a way that's more flowing and harmonious. Because right now they're kind of not, let's say most times, they're not kind of working very harmoniously together. So they're kind of, Sun and Uranus are kind of in a tension relationship. So you kind of want to be free, but it comes out in this kind of erratic way, or where you're kind of maybe pushing against anything that undermines your freedom or something. But there is, still that structured elements of like the Moon in Capricorn and the Saturn in the 10th house and Saturn squared the ascendant. So there is, this is not a real person, so we don't know how it's showing up. But, just looking at this aspect on its own would be this need for freedom and this need for, let's say, expressing yourself in completely free and unhindered, if that's a word. I think it's a word, unhindered ways, like completely just no hindrances, just kind of free to be yourself. And that Leo rising as well wants to be themselves and express themselves no matter what. And then let's look at some of the core emotional needs. So again, Moon is in the 6th house in Capricorn. We've talked about that. Let's see here. So Moon is in a trine with Venus in Taurus. Venus in Taurus is kind of a nice placement that can be, let's say, supportive of harmonious relationships and kind of a stable sense of, relationships, and just wanting kind of calm and stable kind of relationships. And, that Moon is giving a nice harmonious trine to it. So, if this was a real person, I wouldn't be surprised if they had relationships that are kind of, or social life that is kind of harmonious, and the social life is connected to the emotional needs in a way that is supported. So they get their emotional needs met through their friendships, through their relationships, through their relating in a way that is quite harmonious. The Moon is also in a strong trine with Jupiter in Virgo. So that is, again, supporting the emotional life, and maybe the person is quite with the moon in Capricorn, can be achievement oriented, but that Jupiter trine to the moon is kind of giving a kind of a gregariousness to the emotional world and to the way the person kind of handles day-to-day life. I think I can see this person being quite optimistic in some ways, despite the Saturnian and Capricorn themes, which can be quite more sort of serious. But, the Mars in Sagittarius, and moon trine Jupiter, moon trine Venus, would be much more sort of optimistic, and there's a side to the person that they kind of believe in themselves, they believe in their convictions, they believe that they can get through things. So there's that. The moon is in kind of a square to Saturn as well, but it's out of sign. And, again, there will be these kind of Saturnian themes, Moon Saturn, Saturnian themes of needing achievement, maybe holding back the emotions, holding back what you want to do, kind of restricted emotional expression for the sake of achievement or something like that. But I think in here it wouldn't really be that much of a theme, unless it was a real person and, they talked about these themes and it came up, like if it came up in the course of the conversation that these are themes for the person. But I think some of these core Saturnian themes can also be explained by other aspects that are more that are tighter, such as the Saturn with the ascendant, for example. Mercury's in Gemini, and that is a placement that is very, the person has a core psychological need to communicate and express ideas and bounce off other people, and Mercury is the ruler of Gemini, and so it can be a person who's very talkative. Mercury's in the 11th house as well, so the person might have many friends, might be interested in collective consciousness and being a part of something in the collective, talking to a lot of people, maybe talking to neighbors, talking to a lot of friends. So there's that. And let's see some of the aspects. So, there's a very weak, let's say, Mercury squared Jupiter. I wouldn't really talk about that here maybe, but Mercury is square Pluto. And so Mercury square Pluto can be a very powerful communicator, but they need to find ways to kind of not overpower people, not talk over people, and not try to push their ideas. Especially Mercury in Gemini wants to talk a lot and can have kind of an overpowering nature when it comes to just talking a lot. And, there's Pluto in the 3rd house as well. It can be a very forceful communicator. There's a lot of ideas coming out. Mercury, this seems quite significant. Mercury in Gemini in the 11th house, square Pluto in the 3rd house. And there's a lot of other 3rd house activity. The South Node is in the 3rd house, Jupiter's in the 3rd house, Uranus is in the 3rd house. So I think this person is very communicative, and that Jupiter in the 3rd house, for example, really wants to, let's say, communicate a lot, and there's a lot of mental activity that needs to be expressed, especially with Mercury in Gemini as well. Mercury in Gemini has a lot of ideas, has a lot of thoughts, has a lot of things that they want to express through words and writing and communicating and talking to people. And so that Jupiter in the 3rd house is also very indicative of that. There's a need to kind of express your ideas and your grand philosophical ideas and your beliefs and your convictions, different concepts. Uranus in the 3rd house as well is very conceptual. Pluto in the 3rd house is a very sharp communicator, is a very Pluto in the 3rd house, somebody who sees through situations and wants to express what they've seen. So there's a deeper transformative experiences that can happen through communication, and there's a lot of depth in the communication. I mean, Mercury in Gemini isn't as quote unquote deep with communication. It has more to do with breadth, so it wants to communicate about a wide variety of topics. But that Pluto in the 3rd house is quite deep and is very sort of penetrative and sees through situations and wants to talk about them. So in any case, this is not a real person, but in any case, this would be a kind of a communicative some of the communicative themes of this person is that they want to express a lot. There's a lot to express. There's a lot of depth. There's a lot of breadth. Just they want to communicate on a wide variety of topics. And that North Node in the 9th house, it's South Node in the 3rd. It's about kind of learning how to maybe actually have more conviction in your what you're talking about. So this active 3rd house with South Node in the 3rd house as well might mean that the person is a very chit-chatty and wants to just express any thought that comes to them, but this kind of North Node in the 9th house is showing that, well, you actually have to kind of in order to kind of become a better person, you have to kind of actually put more thought into what you're saying and actually have more meaning in what you're saying. So instead of chit-chatting everything and just kind of focusing on the surface level information, it's about, well, how can I derive meaning from things that I observe, and how can I express things with more meaning? Like, what is actually meaningful to say rather than what can I say that's just there to be said. There's talking about things in a chit-chat way, and there's talking about things that are meaningful and that actually are important in the moment. Venus in Taurus is opposite Neptune in Scorpio, and there can be a bit of, this person would maybe have a bit of idealism when it comes to relationships, and they might find themselves in relationships where they're kind of deceived, or they're deceiving others, or they're wearing rose-colored glasses and they can't see the reality of the situation. They're kind of trying to find that beautiful love, that beautiful relationship that is going to, let's say, transport them into other realms, but it's not. You still have to kind of keep your feet on the ground. That Venus in Taurus in the 10th house is very earthy, wants to actually be pragmatic and realistic about things, and so having that Neptune in the mix there, it's kind of making it more difficult to see things as they are. And you might really find yourself in relationships where either you're idealizing somebody else or somebody else is idealizing you. So there is that. A few more things. So the Sun is square Chiron in Cancer. So Chiron in Aries. Sun in Cancer square Chiron in Aries. So Chiron in Aries would mean that the person might have. There's a lot of different ways that it can show up, but the person might have some kind of anger issues or anger themes in their lives, or they might have struggles with forming their own identity or expressing their own identity. And this is in the 9th house, the Chiron in the 9th house in Aries. Maybe the person is quite forceful in communicating their ideas about philosophy, or the person might have some kind of issues of identity when it comes to what they believe, or what they actually, what they believe and think about the world. Maybe they haven't figured out exactly what they think about the world, and so they're trying to, especially with the North Node in the 9th house as well, they're kind of trying to get there. They're trying to get there in this lifetime to figuring out, well, what do I actually believe about the world? What do I actually think about the world? And what are the concepts and the universal kind of concepts and the big themes that actually apply to me in my life, and what do I actually believe in? What ideologies do I actually align with? So again, there's a very active 3rd house. There's a Mercury in Gemini. So the person might be just very communicative and kind of all over the place in communication, but they're trying to find in some way, like, well, what is actually meaningful, and what do I actually believe in that I can talk about. It's not just about talking, like I said before, it's not just about talking randomly about everything, but actually look at, well, what are some of the things that I actually align with, or what things can I align with that kind of align with my values. And the Sun is square that Chiron, so there might be just certain egoic themes of some of these themes. So there might be a focus on Chiron themes in some way, but it's a way that it's causing you kind of tension, whatever way that can show up. So I'm going to finish up soon, but like there is an interesting mix of things here, and that Sun in Cancer in the 12th house is quite private and kind of wants to nurture their own like self and maybe other people, much more private, maybe quite self-reflective about their own emotions, about feelings. But then there is that major kind of 3rd house theme of Pluto, the South Node, Jupiter and Uranus in the 3rd house, Mercury in Gemini, where there's like a need for communication, and that Mercury square Pluto, for example, is this kind of penetrative depth of communication, but you're trying to find that it's not flowing fully yet, so you might be just a blabbermouth, and like you're trying to find that. Like this is kind of some of the main themes that I see in this chart, is that it's trying to get to that 9th house, the North Node in the 9th house, and Chiron in the 9th house. There's certain issues with 9th house themes, so you're trying to find meaning, and you're trying to find, well, what is actually worth talking about and blabbering my mouth about. It's not just about I'm gonna talk about everything and like just an overload of information flow, but actually try to find meaning. That North Node is in Pisces as well, also very spiritual, and trying to find meaning in things, trying to find spiritual meaning in things. This person might be more interested in being kind of active, despite the Sun in the 12th house. They might be more interested in just, doing active things, with the Mars in the 5th house in Sagittarius, with Leo rising. They're trying to achieve and do things, also with, Saturn in the 10th house, squared the ascendant, Moon in Capricorn in the 6th house, very action-oriented, kind of service-oriented, but you're trying to find that spirituality, with North Node in the 9th, Chiron in the 9th. You're trying to get away a little bit from that 3rd house obsession and just kind of, or, not obsession, but, Pluto in the 3rd house can be quite obsessive when it comes to their ideas and the things that they want to communicate. But it is about finding, I think here, it's about finding meaning, and like, what is spiritually mine? What am I actually, what do I value, and what do I want to be aligned with? I hope that made sense. This was kind of interesting to do, and I might make more of these in the future by coming up with random or like generating random dates and random places. So if you like this, do leave a like and subscribe if you want more from me. And leave a comment if any of this was particularly interesting to you and you have thoughts about it. So thank you for listening.